Welcome back, everyone, to the business of Tobago now. Concerns remain high among those in tourism after recently 300 tourists were left without transportation for sightseeing tours after maxi-taxi drivers did not show up for work. Chief Secretary Fali Augustine later said that some cruise lines were threatening to remove Tobago as one of their scheduled destinations over the situation. On the line this morning is Chairman of the Tobago Business Chamber, Martin George. Mr. George, good morning.
Yeah, hi, good morning to you, Marlon, and good morning to your viewers on TV6, and good morning, Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah, Mr. George, before we proceed with our interview, I'm looking at your Christmas tree there. It's putting us in the spirit, you know. I'm just admiring it.
Thank you. You know, I always say, despite all the doom and gloom, we always must look for the positives in life.
Yes, Mr. George. All right, so let's look at this situation where these tourists were left stranded. I know that you would have commented some time ago about this matter, but you being on the ground in Tobago, Mr. George, and speaking, I'm sure, to a number of stakeholders about this matter, has this matter been resolved?
Well, the thing is, I am not yet sure that it has been resolved, because the fact of the matter is that there are two major taxi organizations that operate out of the port of Scarborough. One is the Port Taxi Drivers Association, who you saw their president, Mr. Cloyd Williams, came out and he tried to give an explanation for the actions of his drivers. And the other one is Transmax. And they have been in legal battles for decades. That's all I could say, over the right to transport tourists, etc. And I think the current arrangement is that there's supposed to be a 50-50 sharing agreement. So it would appear from the report and from the press conference given by Mr. Cloyd Williams, it seems that he was speaking on behalf of his members who did not turn out. So I'm not yet sure that the issue has been resolved, you know, because the thing is, they have claimed, you know, that the monies are due and owing. But our point is, regardless of what the scenario is, even if monies are due and owing, this is not the way you go about it. You don't hold tourists to ransom. Marlon, listen, Tobago doesn't understand how fragile its tourist economy is and how much of a fledgling economy it is. You know, I have been on a cruise ship where Tobago was actually one of the destinations because I wanted to see and experience it from the eyes of a tourist coming to Tobago. First of all, Marlon, the write-up that all the other islands had, it went on for pages and pages. Tobago was quarter of a page. That's all they had to say about Tobago. They had nothing much to say about Tobago on the cruise ship, you know. And the thing is, you have to understand that these are people who, some of them, this is a once-in-a-lifetime trip. They would have saved up all their lives, you know, for this trip. They would have, you know, planned in advance, you know, whatever. So therefore, when they pay their monies up front for a pre-booked tour, because the cruise ships always push the idea, look, go with the pre-booked tours, they're safe, they're reliable, you have certainty, you know, this is the very thing that the cruise ships try to tell you. You know, you will not get when you do the pre-book tours, and that's exactly what happened. So, I mean, it's absolutely a mess, and I think that the cruise line agent needs to look at some new arrangement to ensure certainty, reliability, and efficiency in the transport of tourists when they come here for their tours.
But does the Tobago House of Assembly have a responsibility here? And if yes, what do you think about their efforts at this time to resolve this matter?
Well, it's not really that much of a THA responsibility, because the thing is, these are privately owned maxi taxis, you know, who do the tours. So it's not really a THA issue, except insofar as the repercussions in terms of Tobago's overall tourism thrust. The THA has to step in and say something. So that's why I had suggested that Mr. Farley Augustine, make a statement, and I saw that he did, and he was very strong in his condemnation of the actions of the drivers, because the ripple effect of this, you have to understand these cruise lines, there are so many interlocking directorates, and, there's the spillover of ownerships. So I think this is just one cruise line, but they might be owned by Royal Caribbean. They might be, partners with another cruise line. So once they spread the word, it gets filtered through the industry. And then people start to say, well, Tobago is not a reliable destination. Marlon, I remember last year, while I was in Italy, I spoke with a tour operator who actually does tours to the Caribbean. And, I told her I was from Tobago, and, she said, Tobago. So I asked her, well, why the hesitation? She said, the one thing, people love the island, but she says, the feedback she gets, high price, low quality. And I felt so embarrassed, Marlon. And the thing is, Tobago needs to understand you cannot have that type of reputation out there. You have to make sure that people want to come back. I've tried giving them a definition, an explanation of tourism. Tourism is basically a way of pleasantly separating a visitor from his money in a way that he enjoys it so much that he wants to come back and repeat it all over again. Yeah. You have to make the whole experience enjoyable. Make them feel welcome from the start. Make them want to come back, want to recommend it to their friends and family. You don't want them going on Facebook and social media and blasting out Tobago and say, well, we paid for a tour and nobody showed up and the drivers were protesting, and that no visitor wants that on vacation. Yeah. Nobody wants that.
What's your position concerning the Chief Secretary's attempts recently at the world travel market in London? Judging from what the Chief Secretary has said maybe over the past few days about his visit to the world travel market, are you impressed by what he has said? Are you in agreement with the efforts at the world travel market?
Well, the thing is, when one looks at it, it appears that there is still a lack of understanding, cohesiveness, and coherence in what is Tobago's tourism product. If you follow me, Marlon, yes. and that has bedeviled the THA for several iterations. So not just this present administration. It has been a problem that they have been wrestling with. They don't even seem to understand what it is they are trying to project out there to the world. And, the discussion centered on this character, this Jab Malassi character, yes. That they had. And, I saw the Chief Secretary say, well, they were trying to promote Tobago's carnival. But you see, when one looks at the video objectively, it didn't appear to be a carnival presentation as a whole. It was just a lone individual, looking extremely scary and screaming at the visitors, So, if it is that you had all the other carnival characters, you had the Moko Jumbies, you had the Baroquids, you had the, everything, the Peregrinade, and all of them were there in a cast. And then, of course, you show some maybe persons in pretty mask costumes with the feathers, the beads. Then that collective, people could look at and say, well, yeah, this looks interesting, that kind of thing. But to just have this one individual there, carrying on in that manner, of course, if the idea was to grab attention, you did. But then, is it the right type of attention you're attracting? It might be the same like the taxi drivers. You got attention, but is that the right type of attention that you want?
Yeah, I think you described it in the way that a number of persons saw it. A character looking scary, screaming at people. And I think, and Mr. George, the Jab Molassie has a certain type of, when that person is playing the character, it's a type of sort of menacing type of behavior. I suspect maybe the visitors there would not have understood it. Yeah?
But not just that, Marlon. If you think of it, even in Trinidad and Tobago, on the streets for carnival, and we know the character,
yes.
and sometimes children are scared and they run. So could you imagine visitors there, and they're thinking, wait, do I want to bring my children to an island where people look like this and behave like this? If you understand me, how is that a vacation? I'm not sure I can wrap my head around the thinking behind that portrayal. Of course, the person, I guess, was very effective in his role, but if it was to sell Tobago as a tourist destination, I think that they definitely need to go back to the drawing board.
Yeah. Let's look a little bit about the economy, because I know that the Chief Secretary over the past few days was also speaking about the economy. He was in high praise of that the economy is doing well in Tobago. What's your perspective?
What is the economy of Tobago? That's my question, Marlon. If you understand me, how can you call it an economy when you come to Port of Spain every year with a begging bowl to get 3 point something, 4 point something? Sometimes they ask for $5 billion as your budgetary allocation. You generate maybe a total of $100 million in revenue, or a little more than that. How do you square those numbers? That's not an economy. It's a dependency. That's what it is at this point. So Tobago does not have an economy. It's an economic dependency. So when they talk about an economy, it's really an exercise in sophistry. Because you are not being accurate at all to describe it as an economy. I've always said that Tobago at this point really does not have an economy, because without that, $4 billion every year from Port of Spain, Tobago will collapse. So these are the things that we need to start looking at in a serious way, Marlon, because we need to understand that, look, when they talk about they want independence and they want self-governance and they want to do their own thing, I always say that's great. But first, let's aim for financial independence and that fiscal autonomy. Because once you have that, then basically you don't need to go and ask anybody for independence. I've always used a very simple example, Marlon. When you're a child growing up in your parents' home, you depend on your parents for food, clothes, shelter, necessities, transport, everything. But when you become a man and you're working and you're earning your own money and you have your own financial independence, if you need to go and say, look, you want to rent up an apartment and move out, you don't have to ask for permission. You go to your parents and say, hey, listen, mom, dad, I could afford it now. I have a job. I have savings. I'm going to rent an apartment and I move out. You don't need to beg for permission. So Tobago has always had the cart before the horse in this idea of autonomy. And I've repeatedly said, you need to aim for financial and fiscal autonomy first, and everything else will fall in line.
All right. Mr. George, please stay with us for a little while longer. We must go to a very short break. We'll be right back. All right, so we are continuing our discussion with the chairman of the Tobago Chamber, Mr. Martin George. Mr. George, thank you very much for staying with us. Let's deal with the issue of autonomy, because, again, over the past few days, the Chief Secretary was speaking about autonomy, making a case for autonomy for Tobago again. And he was speaking about, well, the Parliament has a role to play because it would need a special majority and so on. I know you would have touched on it briefly a short while ago. But let's speak about the issue in a wider sense, autonomy for Tobago. Is Tobago prepared for that?
Well, as I said, Marlon, first and foremost, I don't think that from an economic standpoint they are. And then secondly, you talk about the legislative requirement and, there's the legislative requirement from central government. But then the question also would be, what would be the legislative arrangement that Tobago is seeking to have going forward if it does gain autonomy? You talk to 5 different Tobagonians, you hear 5 different ideas. Some people talk about a federation, Some people talk about secession. They want to break away totally, Some talk about, you want to have an arrangement like, for instance, St. Kitts Nevis, or an arrangement like what Scotland has with the United Kingdom. So the point is, you ask yourself what it is that they really want. And there appears to be no common thread that you can identify and say, well, hey, listen, yes, this is what we are focusing on, this is what we are planning for. It's almost, Marlon, like, a dog chasing down a car. So you chase the car, and when the car comes to a stop and you catch up with the car, what are you going to do with the car? You sniff around the tires, you pee on the tires. After that, what? What else? If you understand me. So you need to think your plan through and have one cohesive idea to say, well, hey, listen, this is what we're going for. Because there's also the question as to, well, okay, what would the new version of Tobago's own legislature look like? Would it be a unicameral system? Would it be a bicameral system? Would it be one which allows for independent voices, such as we have in our Senate, where you have the independent senators, that kind of thing? All of these things must be clearly identified, and there must be some unity of purpose in terms of what it is they want in that regard. So nobody's saying, no, you don't get it, or you're not entitled to it, or whatever. But the point is, they keep talking about it, but yet still you are not really seeing the fundamentals being laid down to actually work a path towards it. So in other words, you're barking after the car, but you're not thinking through, well, what would I do when I get the car?
Yeah. Let's, and we're speaking to Martin George, and we're speaking about a number of things this morning. We have put everything on the table when we're speaking about Tobago, Mr. George. Let's talk about politics a little bit now. You think that the tensions, the political tensions that we saw earlier this year in Tobago, you think those tensions have been put to rest, and now Tobago can move on in political peace, if I can put it that way?
Well, I mean, certainly between Mr. Watson Duke and Mr. Farley Augustine, I don't think anything has settled. I think that really and truly, basically, any call for rapprochement or, a reconciliation or an embrace is going to be an embrace where, each would be holding the long knife, behind their backs, just waiting for the moment to pounce. So, you can't, take that at all as any sort of real unity. Even in Trinidad, on the larger scale, we saw, the one love, of the NAR and, coming together, and the 33 victory. You see how quickly that evaporated, and you saw Mr. Pandey and Mr. Robinson had the biggest fallout, and then it was daggers drawn after that. So I think that is not going to change, in fact, even though, former Prime Minister Pandey has said, in politics, there are no permanent enemies or friends. The reality is, I don't see that, Mr. Duke and Mr. Augustine can really heal that divide, because I think their supporters are also encamped, against each other. So therefore, the positions are hardening. Now, the interesting thing, Marlon, is that what this scenario brings about is a narrative where you will see that the two Tobago seats are actually going to be the two most important seats in the upcoming general election. If you think of it, you look at the numbers between the PNM and the UNC, the major parties in Trinidad, and you realize that those two seats are pivotal. Right now, they are held by the PNM. If the PNM is not able to retain those two seats, and if either Mr. Augustine or some other entity were to get those two seats, that can change the balance of power, So it is really going to be critical going forward. So, Tobago is actually the fulcrum of the national election, scale. in that they can actually tip it one way or the other with those two seats. So they will always remain relevant in that regard. And, I think that persons really need to start thinking in terms of how you approach it for the 2025 general election.
Yeah. Martin George, it's always a pleasure speaking with you, and thank you for allowing me to put so many issues on the table this morning, Monday morning.
I recognize that you've decided to put all your eggs in one basket.
As only you can put it, Mr. George. It's always a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you
Until
very
we
much.
speak again. Bye for now.
Have a great morning.
All right.
Okay.